Hey, yes, we are back for another evening on Thursday here. Things have been pretty busy working on the book and trying to keep up on orders, and when I look over and see that for a couple of days there's hardly any orders coming in, I have to go and take care of that and see what's going on, and the webcast can kind of end up at the end of the queue there. That's kind of why the Patreon donations are so important. That way I can keep prioritizing the online videos. So that's what we're doing here today. So anyway, yeah, these webcasts, they do take a lot of work. 45 frames just to prepare each tab here up at the top. You can see all these tabs here. I've got to get all of that set up at the beginning of each day. So, and of course the animations. I have to kind of keep that stuff looking good. So let's head on into it and look at the weather. We do have a change in the pattern. It is the transition season. We're getting into fall here. And we can see out east there is a lot of cool air out in that area. High pressure, and we're seeing kind of like an anticyclonic flow in that area. So out in this area there's ridging, and coming around the west side of that we've got easterly flow, a very strong easterly component becoming southerly around Minnesota and the Dakotas right there. Up north it looks like we have some Canadian air working in. Out in this area right there. Some northwesterly flow coming in there from Saskatchewan and Alberta and Montana. And then we have southwesterly flow across the Four Corners in southwestern U.S. So a couple different air masses there. And I would have to probably delineate that somewhat like this. So there you go. Up north we have kind of a continental polar, maritime polar situation. The old continental tropical, I wonder where these designations went. They kind of disappeared with the advent of numerical models. And then around the eastern U.S. we got kind of a mixture of polar and a little bit of recycled tropical air starting to come up from the south right through there. So we're seeing temperatures come up, and we've got 75 again tonight. We had a couple of cold evenings here, but we're getting right back up towards 90 once again. So that's kind of the game plan, what's going on, and we can look at the thickness and isobars. Very obvious where the frontal boundary is, from Hudson Bay down to the Dakotas and down across the Great Basin area. So south of that, that's where we're going to put the front. And then that continues up north as a Canadian front up through there. And then we've got what either looks like maybe a warm front there in the Midwest, around Kansas City, Nebraska, but the surface map was suggesting maybe a boundary a little further south. But the way temperatures have come up today, I think we're probably looking at more something like that right there. So let's see just what things do look like at the surface there. We'll head down to the south. And there's Texas. Lots of 80s, 70s, and 80s. Dew points are on the mild side. Lower to mid-60s across Texas there. And a few 70s on the coast right there. So some of that tropical air is starting to come right up into the state. And then further west we get into some of the drier air. And maybe a little bit of a dry line in West Texas right through here. So let's see if we can pin down where that warm front is. Well, we've got 80s in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, 76 at Oklahoma City, and then down to 70 at Little Rock, and then 60 around Carbondale, 62 in Indiana. So we definitely do cool down as we go towards the northeast. And as a result, we're going to put the front somewhere in here. And let's see just where that would be. 77 at Hot Springs, 76 at McAllister. I think we're going to have to put the warm front, something like that right there. So that matches up pretty well with the thickness and isobars. So pretty close, somewhere in that area right there. Okay, then further up north, we've got the new front coming in from the Dakotas. And there's the leading edge of that coming from about Fargo to just south of Pierre and down to about North Platte there. Coming into the Denver area, north winds there, 68 degrees out of the north, and then 58 with north winds there in Cheyenne. So where does that extend into the Rockies? Got to keep in mind the Rockies kind of runs through this region right there. Well, we've got north winds there in the high plains, and then it kind of just tails on off, and then we pick up westerly flow out in the Rockies. So we're going to put the leading edge of that cold front probably something like that right there. So the main push of that cold air through the Dakotas like that, and then what we have out further west, that's going to be probably polar air in Wyoming, and then tropical air as we go further south. Some very warm conditions there around Grand Junction. 70 degrees in that area. 75 at Farmington. That's some very warm air for this time of year. And when you look at potential temperature, there's that potential temperature ridge right there across the Rockies. So this is the warmest air in the North American continent normalized to sea level, going right through New Mexico and into Colorado. So this is all definitely tropical air, a very dry tropical air. And then when you get further up north into Salt Lake City, that's where we pick up the frontal boundary. Okay, so now using that knowledge of where all the boundaries are, where the air masses are, now we have a good basis for looking at soundings. So sure, yeah, we can take a look at that real quick. Okay, so we're going to use University of Wyoming here. And we'll use the evening sounding, which is going to be 13th at 0Z. And let's go into the heart of the warm air mass. We'll go to Albuquerque. Okay, so there's what a super warm air mass is going to look like. And you can see that we start from about 25 Celsius in the higher elevations there. And we've got a dry adiabatic lapse rate all the way up to about 16,000 feet there. So very warm air. And then above that, we've got a little bit of a subsidence inversion. A little bit of moisture there. We start out from about 43 Fahrenheit near the surface, and a very gradual tapering with height. So it's not super dry air, but if we had a little bit more moisture, a little bit more instability, we could probably squeak out some high-based showers. Of course, we'd also need some cooler air aloft. And then you can see the very strong westerly flow aloft. And let's head out to Flagstaff. So they're going to be in the warm air once again. Very similar profile there to Albuquerque. Very steep lapse rate all the way up to about 12,000 feet. and then a little bit of a subsidence inversion above that, and you can see the very strong westerly component, also with a southerly component. And let's try going further north. Let's try Salt Lake City. So that could be up in the polar air. Indeed, the winds, they pick up quite a bit. I can see 115 knots up there. And the profile has kind of a cooler appearance. It looks like everything is kind of shifted over to the left. And we see a lot of dry air in the mid-levels. Nothing really to distinguish that between the air in the desert southwest, except the line is further over to the left compared to the profile we saw there at Albuquerque. So that's not a big surprise. The air masses are kind of hard to differentiate when you get out there in the desert and in the western U.S., and you're very reliant on trends and climatology. But here's one clue. In the lower levels, we can see northerly flow. Right there at, again, this is Salt Lake City. So there could be a little shallow layer of cool air. And looks like the humidity comes up a little bit. So that could very well be a little layer of cold air right in here. And let's go a little bit further into the cold air. We'll go up to Boise. And they're almost certainly going to be in the polar air. Look at that tropopause way down low at about 29,000 feet. So the tropopause probably right around here. And the temperature trace way over to the left. Lots of humidity from about 10,000 up to 25,000 feet. So there's probably going to be some layers of altocumulus and cirrus. Okay, let's take a look at the infrared imagery. If I can find it, there it is. Okay, so this is infrared imagery, but this is the water vapor window here. So we're looking at where moisture is attenuating radiation from reaching the satellite, and as a result we see kind of cold temperatures where we have a lot of moisture. So it looks like a couple bands of that. We've got this one band over Texas, has kind of an anticyclonic appearance, so that could be a subtropical jet right there. And what we have over the Rockies, this is almost definitely a polar front jet. So there you go, probably looking at a jet, something like that, across the western U.S. And we can see gravity waves. Look at that right there over Colorado. So stable layers in the upper levels with very strong flow across the Rockies, and we pick up that signature right there. So some of the denser moisture running from about Las Vegas up to South Dakota, and let me see if we can take a quick look at that in terms of sounding. So I'm going to go to Las Vegas. Looks like they're in the middle of that moisture. And we do see a little bit of humidity up there at the top of the column. And let me look at Grand Junction also. And there also we do pick up some moisture, not a whole lot in the upper levels, but enough to register there a bit. And big contrast with the dry air in the lower levels. So if we had just enough instability, enough moisture in those mid-levels, and if we got some showers going, that would be a good pattern for downbursts. Okay, let's see what we got in chat. See who we have here. Mike R. joining us, and Ryan Toomey's. Rainy South Florida. Still feels like summer there. Mike R. wishing it would rain in Northern California. We have Veo Joe here. David Moore. Upper 80s in the Metroplex. Looking forward to a cool down Sunday. Yeah, we've definitely got that coming up. Mike R. getting smoked field air there. I think in the Bay Area there. Ryan taking note of the Napa Valley fires. We've got Burl H. here and Alexi Walsh. Ryan mentioning the fires again there. Mike R. mentioning 3 days of heavy, moderate to heavy smoke there. Schools closed due to air quality. Mike Estwick is joining us. Veo Joe says 55 in central Illinois. Greg Schultz looking for severe chances in southern Wisconsin on Saturday. Whereas Mike R. there in California looking for offshore flow on Friday night. Mike Estwick saw 81 degrees earlier in Denver until that front came in. We have Sue M. here, overcast and rainy there in Indiana due to that warm air advection pattern coming in from the southwest. We have Fun with Tech. Greg Schultz asking if there's a way to look at a sounding with the wildfires. I mean, we're not going to really see the smoke on the soundings, but we can take a look at Oakland, and what we see here is a lot of dry air. And northerly flow there in the low levels. And then when you get further aloft, we pick up a very strong westerly flow. Most of that smoke taking place down in that region. It would really help to have a Sacramento sounding, but we just have to make do with what we have. And then the Reno sounding is going to be looking like this here. Probably picking up a little bit more of that polar air, especially with that low tropopause. Bill Johnson mentioning his parents live in San Francisco Bay Area. Absolutely horrible to breathe. Yeah, sorry to hear about that. School's canceled. School buses not running. Trish Amlou asking about the radar over the weekend in Wisconsin. Yeah, we can take a look at a little bit of the precipitation chances there in Wisconsin on the GFS there. And Electric Dog, late but made it. Okay, so yeah, let's start heading into the forecast here and looking at things over the next few days. There's not a whole lot going on today except for that smoke there. Look how clear it is in the most of the U.S. We do have a little bit of instability there in the Pacific Northwest right there. You can see that very cellular look to the clouds there. Fair weather in the southwestern U.S. Then up in the north central U.S., we've got that front coming down. But wow, things very clear across much of the western U.S., and then only when we get down into South Florida, we pick up some rain in that area. Now, it does look like underneath all the clear air, we do have a little bit of low cloud. I don't know if you can make out that outline, but yeah, there is a little bit of low cloud there from Wisconsin to Illinois into the Toledo and Detroit area, almost blending in with the warm surface temperatures. And looks like a little bit more of that in the Carolinas, Virginia, and Maryland and Pennsylvania there. So we do have some changes coming up over the next week or so. We can take a look at that in terms of upper level conditions. So very active jet across California with that polar front jet coming in. So over the next few days, we're going to see that move into the central and north central U.S. And that'll push out over the Great Lakes for the weekend. Then we see a trough coming in from the Rocky Mountains right there on Saturday. And that moves very quickly into the northern Midwest for Sunday. So we're going to be expecting to see some weather there. Very strong zonal flow, so we get kind of a mixture of disturbances moving through, ridges and troughs moving very quickly eastward during the next week or two. There's another big trough for the 21st and 22nd. And more strong flow coming in and there. Now we get a major pattern shift coming up for the 26th, 27th. And we go to a meridional pattern with very strong north flow. And that's probably going to bring in a lot of cold air for Washington and Oregon if that pans out there. And with a polar vortex over Manitoba, we'll probably see some cold air out over the northern U.S. also. Southwesterly flow across the Great Plains, though, that's probably going to keep the progress southward of that cold air in check. But we are at the very end of the chart run there. If this was January or February, we would probably be looking at a major Rocky Mountain winter weather system, probably out in this region here. Okay, in terms of the surface chart, we'll check that out also. Okay, so not a whole lot going on over the next few days. Looks like a little more moisture coming through Texas, allowing for some storms to develop in the central plains right there. Snow showers in the mountains of Montana and Idaho. This is for Saturday and Sunday. And this system will be coming together here in Colorado. And there it goes into Iowa, moving up to Chicago and Milwaukee. And behind it, some very strong cold air advection. So we're going to see a strong front coming in Saturday night into Sunday into the central and southern plains. And there's the source of the cold polar air up north. So that'll move very quickly Sunday into the northeastern U.S. A little bit of snow coming in back and behind it. And it looks like most of that is going to stay north of Wisconsin. Maybe a little bit of snow in the Duluth area there for Sunday morning. So the snow line looks like it kind of stays up in this area right there along the north edge of Lake Superior into the Sudbury and North Bay area. So that'll be out the door for Monday. Kind of a mild pattern across much of the U.S. for early next week. Things will warm back up for Texas and the southern U.S. once again. And then our next system comes in from the west. And there it comes in through the Rockies, moving into the Central Plains for the weekend around the 19th, 20th, and 21st. And once again, that'll head into the Great Lakes area once again. A little bit weaker, it appears. And then we get to the end of the run, and now you can see a major change here around the 25th and 26th. Lots of cold air up in Canada. And there's that high building in, 1040 millibar high in British Columbia, pushing a lot of cold air southward. And that's what the fronts will be looking like around that time. And this will probably give us our next shot of cold air. And you can see how quickly that works into Texas for the 27th. And I really hope that this is not the GFS cold bias, because we could definitely use some of that cold air. And then towards the very end, looks like the model trying to bring in a hurricane into the Bahamas right about here. So there it is. There's that track right there through Cuba and into the Bahamas, and we're just going to have to wait and see on that. That's going to be about 8 or 9 days before we have a good idea of the track of that. But it does look like the Gulf will be active one more time, with possible risk of that coming up into Florida there later on. Okay, let's see what we're looking at in terms of temperatures. Actually, I think one good way to look at it is snowfall. So look at the snow depth here, because that's going to lay down the snowpack. And if we have snowpack, especially fresh snowpack, that's going to help generate polar air, especially up in Canada. So you can see starting out mostly limited to the northern Rockies, going into the 15th, 16th, and 17th. Snowfall dissipates, and looks like more snow generating in British Columbia. So, not a whole lot of snowpack across Canada just yet. But it looks like, yeah, look at that right there. As that high pressure builds in from British Columbia with that big push coming up around the 23rd and 24th. We're going to have that cold front coming south, and then a lot of upslope just behind that cold front right there. And that's what's going to cause a lot of that precip there in Wyoming and Colorado towards the 27th and 28th. So the GFS going for about 20 inches of snow there in the higher elevations of Colorado, but that's still quite a ways off. So assuming the temperatures are accurate, let's go all the way to the 24th and 25th. And there we can see that cold air coming in. These are temperatures on the 26th at 1 p.m., 20s and 30s, and a few teens for Wyoming. So this is definitely some cold air. And then we see nighttime lows. This is midnight, so it's going to be even colder than this, according to the GFS. Probably our first temperatures below zero there in Wyoming. And you can see in Texas, if that happens, we're going to see lots of 40s and 50s there in Texas. You can see there that's 1 p.m. temperatures, ranging from 38 there at Amarillo to 50 at DFW and 55 at San Antonio. So we'll just wait and see, and maybe in about a week we'll have an idea if that's coming together there in the north central U.S. Okay, well, it's probably about time for me to get back to work on the book, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So that's about all I got for today. Hope you all have a good evening, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.